This is a pen that is different. This is the Noodler's Boston Safety Pen, and it works differently and fills differently than most other fountain pens. That wasn't always the case. 100 years ago or so, these type of safety pens were very common. Now, this might be one of the few that is currently being manufactured. I'm going to go through the different parts of the pen like I normally do, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how this pen works and how it fills, because like I said, it is quite a bit different than other pens. First, let's get some of the basics out of the way in terms of size. It is a long pen and a skinny pen. So if we compare it to a Lamy Safari and a Pilot Metropolitan, you see that it is quite a bit longer than either of these pens. Weight-wise, it is not that heavy. It weighs only 20 grams. And the weight is mainly, the lightweight is mainly because this pen is almost completely made of ebonite. The only parts of this pen that are not ebonite are the clip, the nib, and a few rubber O-rings inside. The internal and external components are all otherwise made of ebonite. And it's a nice looking pen. As you can see, this particular material is what they call chestnut. It's a black and brown streaked material. It says Boston Safety Pen engraved on the pen in two places, on the cap and on the lower part of the barrel. And the clip is sort of an ordinary Noodler's clip. It just says Noodler's Ink Company, Noodler's Ink on the side of the clip. So that's the ordinary parts of the pen so far. Now let's look at what makes this pen special. First of all, when we open the cap, you immediately see what's unusual about it. There doesn't seem to be a nib. The nib is actually retracted into the barrel. When I open up the cap, I have to keep it upright. There's nothing keeping the ink from just running out. So essentially, think of this as just sort of an open barrel full of ink with the nib sitting down below inside of it. When you're not using the pen and the nib is retracted, the nib is effectively soaking in the ink. That is a very important feature for a lot of people and a lot of use cases for this pen. Because the nib and feed are never allowed to dry out in theory, one can actually use inks with this pen that one cannot normally use in a fountain pen. India inks, calligraphy inks, etc. For a lot of artists and people such as that, that is an important feature to have. Another important plus for the safety pen, and the reason why this is originally called a safety pen is, we see how this is open. When I close the cap, the inside of the cap is going to seal the top of that pen off. So a normal fountain pen, if I was to store it upside down or to jostle it around, ink can come out of the nib and wind up in the cap. That won't happen here because that top is effectively sealed by the inside of the cap, and it can do that because the nib is retracted into the body of the pen. So those are the two big pluses. As with most things in life, there's a trade-off, and that trade-off is you have to keep this pen upright when you're uncapping it and while the nib is not extended. Once you extend the nib, and I'm doing so by pushing up this slide on the bottom while giving it a little bit of a twist, then when the nib is fully extended, that top is now again sealed, and the ink obviously won't run out, and now you can use it pretty much like you would a normal fountain pen, and a pen does post as well. It's not super long when posted, so let's compare it to, say, the Lamy Safari when posted. When posted, it's only a tiny bit bigger than the Lamy Safari. The nib is a Noodler's nib. It's the same nib, I believe, that's found on the Conrad. It is a ventless nib. It does not have a breather hole, and it has a slit that runs pretty much the full length of the nib, and it says simply Noodler's Ink Company on the nib. And like I said before, the feed is an ebonite feed. You probably noticed these threads here. There's a fair amount of threads. It took 3 1/4 turns to open this pen. That's necessary because you need to make that inside of the cap needs to make a very, very tight seal in order for the entire safety pen principle to work. As you can imagine, the only way to fill this pen is through an eyedropper. So you retract the nib and then you eyedropper fill through the top right there. That's how the pen is filled. There you go. That's pretty much it in terms of the parts of the pen. You're probably wondering how it writes. Let's find out right now. Okay, what we have here is the Noodler's Boston Safety pen. In all honesty, this pen writes okay and just okay. It's certainly smooth, and it writes for general writing purposes. If you wanted to do anything fancy, like flex it, it supposedly has some flex, but when you try to flex it, you get railroading pretty much right away. So this feed really can't keep up with any sort of flexing. But if that's not important to you, and it really isn't to me, you know, then you're fine. I mean, it's good as a general writing pen. A lot of people want a flex pen. This is a $55 pen. It's not a cheap pen. It's got nice material that's made out of ebonite, so that's part of what the cost is. However, if you wanted a flex pen, there are better choices. There are even better choices from the same company, from Noodler's. So you definitely have better options there. So I would say this pen writes okay, but just okay. In terms of this ink, this is a very nice ink. This is a long name. It's from the Birmingham Pen Company. So this is Birmingham. Shady Side. Walnut Street. Brown. So the Birmingham Ink Company is based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They sell these nice little bottles of ink. They name all the inks after people, places, and things having to do with Pittsburgh, and so this one is no exception. Shady Side and Walnut Street are locations in Pittsburgh, and I did just smear that ink. So yes, it's not the fastest drying ink in the world, but as you can see, the stuff from a minute or two ago dries pretty fast. But I like this ink quite a bit. You know, I'm a big fan of brown inks in general. This is certainly an accurate name for this. Walnut is a good way of describing this. If you have walnut wood furniture or anything like that, then this color will definitely be familiar to you. I like it. It flows decently nicely. It is a good color with some character, a little bit of interesting shading going on. If you're in the market for a brown, maybe something on the darker side, this is a little bit on the darker brown side, will not draw tons of attention to itself. So you can use this in business and work context, etc. You should be fine. It's a good, solid ink. It has about average dry time. Doesn't seem to feather, doesn't seem to bleed through, and I like it. Nice ink. That's about it. Not much more to say there. And I think that will do it for this pen review. As always, if you like it, please subscribe. If you don't, please leave me a comment and give me some feedback as to what you don't like about it. And as always, until next time, bye-bye.